So there's a lot of room sound on the drums. I kind of dig it. There's a little bit of a tinny sound that I'm getting, particularly off of the kick. I'm not sure I'm in love with, and mainly the main thing that's bothering me actually is the way that the bass feels like it's kind of sitting back and receded. It doesn't feel like it's lacking growl or those upper mids that normally pull something forward. It just kind of feels like there's something thin going on in the primary bass range to that like first overtone where it just feels a little bit neglected, I guess, for a better way of putting it. So let's listen to the bass and solo real quick. So, the first move is just turning it up. That's always the simplest solution. Whenever we're trying to bring something forward, everybody always wants to grab a compressor, grab an EQ, or anything like that. The easiest way to do it is, can I turn up the output of the music of the tad? I sure can. Let's go. Right there. You're not hearing a lot of music. That's interesting. It's really loud on my end. That should be loud as can be. Oh, I see. It's my voice relative to the music. Okay, let me turn my voice down. This is not my day. Test 1 2, test 1 2. That a little better? Okay, great. Yeah, so right off the bat, just turning it up has solved a lot of issues. I think that maybe the tone could be refined a little bit. It's a little bit kind of loose, so to speak. And I don't mean that in the sense of it being like roomy or the dynamics being off or anything like that. There's just like, it feels like extra flubby tones kind of getting in there a little bit. So, okay, let's jump back over to the drums now. Alright, so we got pretty roomy sounding kick. Obviously, that's pretty intentional. Felt like there was something else that was giving the kick a little bit more. What was that? What do we think this is? Let's go mute these effects and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Let's get the snare in. Big, gross, ugly, stupid slapback on the snare. I love it. Let's get in the clap. It's making me want to tighten up that kick a little bit, but let's get the hats on there. Okay, a lot of room on the hat. So yeah, all of this is making me want to tighten the kick a little bit. So let's so basically it's like I like the roomy effect. I like what we're going for here. But in order to make the record feel punchy and strong, we need something that's going to have a little bit more definition and forwardness to it. So there's a couple of things that we can try here for tightening up a kick sound. One is a compressor, believe it or not. It's a little counterintuitive, but if the attack is slow enough and the compressor is kind of a brighter sounding compressor, it will actually add attack as opposed to take it away. And let's see, let's do Transify. That's always a good one. And then, of course, the more obvious one here is the Transient Designer. So I'm going to try the compressor first. We're going to see if that works. And then if that doesn't work, we're going to try the Transient Designer. Did you hear what I mean? How the front of the kick feels like it's being emphasized when I bring this in? That's kind of the possible effect here, and I actually kind of like what this is doing. So I think this is a pretty good starting point. And then maybe just dialing back some of the room tones a little bit with the transient designers. So let's start from the low frequencies. And then a lot of it's actually in the upper mids. So we're going to see if we can really tighten up the upper mids. Yeah, there's not like nothing in the highs. But so we're going from here. There. Giving it just a little bit more definition on the front end. And that's going to really help once we have all this other really roomy stuff going on. Yeah, I mean, even just that little bit of difference, I think, is really a tremendous difference in terms of the feel of the groove, because now we have an actual solid anchor to really kind of grab onto. I will also say it is a little bit of a... It's not like it lacks sub, it's actually pretty subby for like a disco funk kind of thing, so it definitely sounds more modern, but I wish... Maybe I'll throw on the VSX for just a second. That's what I'll do. I'll throw on VSX for a second, just so that I can check it, and then you can at least understand what I'm doing and why I'm using this. But basically, when I'm listening for like deep low end, a really good way of hearing it is throwing on this club setting and listening back. Like, basically that club setting, that low end, should be like huge. It should be like way out of proportion, and if it's not, then maybe something else is going on here. So I'm going to grab an EQ, and I'm going to put just a little bit of deep sub into our kick, because I think it could use it. I'm talking like way lower than we would expect, so like 36 hertz type of place. I feel like I always have to qualify this too whenever I do this with analyzers on, but if we don't go over by what you're looking at, but you can actually kind of see that this sub frequency is a little bit underrepresented. So it's just kind of confirming what I'm already hearing. Doesn't really mean much because I'm doing this anyway. It could have been all sub and it would have been fine. And I don't want to go too much because part of the style too is also to have the kick a little bit higher focused in the primary bass range, like that is typical of this style. And if this 808 is doing its job, then most of the sub should be in the 808. Yeah, and there's a lot of sub down there, so just turning the 808 up a little bit also helps to provide that sub. I'm sticking with this move, though. I think that if we wanted to be, like, era-specific, we could skip the low-end bump, but because I think that we're not making any illusions about this being a modern record, it's better to have it there. is this doing? Oh, we're not solo safe. Okay. That's a really bassy hi-hat. So this is where analyzers are helpful. If there's too much subtone in this hi-hat, I don't really want it. But I actually don't mind it being bassy. Huh. So we've talked in previous webinars, by the way, about how like if you've ever seen those pitch graphs that say like EQ 22.5K for presence and cut 400 hertz to remove woofiness and why that's all bullshit. This is a really prime example, right? We've talked about how the presence of a hi-hat is actually at around like 6K, 7K. So the same presence range that we typically hear on a voice is going to be, you know, somewhere between maybe 900 hertz at the very lowest to maybe like 4K at the very brightest range. It's a pretty wide range. That same range for a hi-hat is like 6K to 9K, and then the treble and brightness of the hi-hat is to the 10K plus stuff. But the bass of a hi-hat starts occurring at around 1K, and we don't normally think of like 1K as a bass range, but we can hear how bassy this hi-hat sounds, and then on an analyzer we can see where the actual bass is showing up. And it's 500 hertz basically, which I think is fun. But anyway, we definitely don't have to worry about sub buildup on that for sure. That thing has been high pass to hell. So I didn't choose this record for any specific reason. This is just another one. It's Shamik, the same guy who did the last record that we did for the contest. This is one of their records, and one of the things that I think is really important to teach is that we have to be very, very objective about what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done. Right now, I'm not hearing anything in these drums that like is specifically calling to me and saying, "Hey, you need to do some shit." There's some room stuff that I might want to tighten up later down the line, possibly, but for right now, I actually really like the way these drums sound. I haven't EQ'd really anything. The only thing is I kind of fixed up the kick a little bit. Uh, but I'm really, really liking the sound of it. And because of that, you know, I want to make sure that if that I'm willing to say like, okay, well, maybe it's perfect. You know, maybe it's exactly what it needs to be. One thing that definitely helps to gain perspective, though, is to turn the volume down. Right now, my volume's fairly loud, so I'm going to turn my playback down and just see how it feels when it's a little quieter. And when I do that, I notice two things. There's a fair amount of like room tone that's kind of cluttering up a little bit around 300, 400 hertz. Not so much where I necessarily feel like anything needs to be done, but also I do notice that I wish there was a little bit more bite on the snare and clap once I turn it down. Yeah, it's mainly on the snare. I need just a little bit more sharpness from that. So I think just that same idea, transient designer. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm going to go for more center frequencies, so I'm going to go for like stuff that's above 400 and going up to maybe 4K, and just going to give us a little bit more of that. I do like the 400 hertz because it's a kind of fat sound, but I think maybe I just want to go a little bit higher just to kind of have a slightly tighter, pokier sound. Or what I want to do is go lower and actually just do less of it. And stretch it a little bit higher as well. So this stuff, just a little bit of that. Okay, that's pretty good. Yeah, to be honest, with the multi-band transient designer, it's actually not my first choice of this for this. The I haven't installed the Slate transient designer here. I would prefer to be using that for this purpose, and I find that the Waves transient designer, I have a lot of difficulty getting it to sound good. So those are my transient designer options. So this is actually a little bit less than ideal, but I think that I can still make it work anyway. It's going to be fine. So the last time we did a sort of funk-inspired kind of record, we talked about that how important the bass is, and basically we should consider the bass to be like a lead vocal. I definitely think this is the case here, probably more than the last example that we actually did this. So it's really, really, really important that this bass is crisp, solid, full represented, smooth, big, all those good things. So I'm going to try and tighten it up a little bit. There's something kind of like a little bit murky, I guess, for lack of a way of putting it. Um, One thing that can sometimes just easily help tighten up a bass and make it a little bit more present is actually removing bass, which is a little bit weird. But if we grab a gradual shelf from the sub range, we can kind of tighten up the subs and emphasize maybe a little bit more the primary bass, and more importantly, some of those overtones that give the bass its presence and its character and its vocalization qualities. Yeah, and we can hear just a little bit in here something happening. So I'm pretty sure it's sympathetic string noise that we're getting in the lower range. Yeah, just a little bit less of that. And unsurprisingly, there was a little bit of something weird around like 400 hertz, which is pretty common for basses. I don't like to pretend like that's always going to happen, but it does happen fairly frequently, where something around 300 to 400 hertz just sounds like there's a little extra air. Yeah, let's just keep looping that up. Yeah, so back in this same range again, like around 106. Basically, we want to have everything that's between about 110 hertz to about 400 hertz emphasized, and also maybe a little bit of this like 80 hertz emphasized. So I'm just gonna have like a little narrow Q thing happening here. I'm gonna take down a little bit more of, where was this set? Let's move this corner up to like 110 and widen it a little bit, and then take a little bit more down. Actually sounded better when we were cutting it from REQ, so I'm gonna do that. We're gonna put this back to where it was. We're gonna do that additional cut. Sometimes I do not understand why things work the way they work in sound, but we're gonna do it anyway because that's what the ear is telling us. So we're gonna go back to 116, and we're gonna dip out just a little bit right there. All right, in terms of dynamics, this feels pretty controlled to me. It's, you know, this is either very evenly played or already going through a compressor of some sort. But I think what I'm going to do here is add a little bit of MV2. This is a upward compressor, and sometimes just putting a little bit in there gives it a nice little tone and a little extra body. Definitely not bad. Okay, we're going to just fine tune it. And I know this seems like a little obsessive, but I'm going to go down to like 55 hertz, and I'm going to take out like 1 more dB. So it's rolling off a little bit more deep sub, but from like a slightly deeper corner frequency to leave the higher bass tones a little more alone. So now what I'm going to do, and again, for those who are just joining us, you know, I only have one set of outputs for everybody. So if you don't have VSX, it's going to sound really weird when I turn this on. But I'm going to turn it back on, and I'm going to go back to that club setting where the bass tends to be really flubby. And if the bass should sound very, very big, but it should still sound tight and controlled. Now, for anybody who doesn't have VSX, this is going to sound really weird. Apologize for that. Session wire kind of need to work that out in order to do this. Let's get this volume up. That's pretty darn close to where it needs to be, I would say. Our bass is definitely tight enough. The kick, we have room tone on the kick. That's just going to be part of it, and I think that it's translating fine. Once all the other elements are in, I might decide to add just like a general shelf of low end to the overall record. But I think as more elements start to show up, it's going to become more clear whether or not I want to do that. I am getting a little concerned that the bass guitar feels like it's receding a little bit. And it's happening particularly in the like 400, 500 hertz range. That might just be an effect of the club, So what I'm going to do is pop back over here to Steven's room and check that on the midfields specifically, because if I know that if the bass feels like it sinks back on the midfields here, then it's going to not translate correctly. Like, I'm hearing that really, really nice rattle from the bass, which is good. I want to keep that, but it actually does feel like maybe around the 300, 400, 500 hertz range where I was taking this out, things have kind of sat back a little too much. So I'm going to stretch out my upper mids, maybe even push a little more in there. I'm going to pull this up, and I'm going to see if I can find a slightly better balance. Yeah, like maybe it needs a little bit more like 800 kind of stuff in here. That feels better. It's actually, unfortunately, I wish I had both the sets of output. This is why I really wanted to do this with Session Wire, because if I have both sets of outputs, then I can be monitoring off of VSX while also sending out the clean broadcast, and Zoom doesn't let me do that. But basically, this is so much easier to hear what's happening when I have the room emulation on. I'm going to turn it back off, but that still sounds good. And that's also part of it too, is, sometimes I do just listen on the headphones themselves. I usually use the HD linear, which is basically the headphones but like slightly more balanced. But that's translating pretty well as well, and everything is telling me the same thing, that the bass could actually maybe come forward a little bit more even. So I'm just gonna keep a note here. It just says bass even more lead vocally, right? Which is absolute gibberish, but makes perfect sense to me. All right, so this is about the time where we can start bringing in maybe some peripheral groove elements just to figure out where the color of things is sitting and fill out some more of the space and stuff like that. And then once we start getting the lead vocal in, that's when we're really going to understand what the relationship of the bass is. Yeah, hit that mute. There we go. Yeah, I mean, so this is another example of where, as we bring things into context, it can sort of help define where things need to be. Like, my gut instinct is that wants to have a little bit more of that kind of 300 hertz weight to it. And if there's another element or pad or something that's going to provide that later, then maybe we don't need to EQ that in. And if there isn't, then maybe we do. Looks to me, based on the arrangement I'm staring at, that for the verse section, most of this is just by itself. Now, does that mean we need to EQ it in for this part of the arrangement? Not necessarily. Sometimes by not having something filled in the space, we can create a sense of that the ear needs to hear something later down the line. So another way we form tension and release is with frequency stuff. We can have no bass in a record, and the ear wants to hear bass, and then when that bass comes in, it feels so satisfying. So we don't necessarily need to compensate for changes in arrangement. We'll start to figure it out as we puzzle it together. Let's bring in this Strat guitar. So the Strat guitar is pretty bright, pretty pinched. I like it that way, sounds good, but it's kind of telling me maybe a little bit more 300 in this main chord thing. Let's get in our pads. Definitely need that up ever so slightly, just because that's what's going to change the section, right? We see it marked here. We have our verse, then we have our pre, then we have our hook. This is telling us we're in a new section, so we definitely want to have that up for the excitement. There's a nice little side chain action that's happening on this, which I really dig. I might want to have that on this as well. Yeah, I'm gonna put a little bit of that same kind of sidechain movement. Let me just solo the other one so you guys really hear it and get it. Now you hear that womp, womp, womp kind of pumping thing happening. Reverbs and delays are great places to have that kind of sidechain movement in there, but I think I want a little bit of it in this as well. And maybe not quite that much. I feel like that's a little too obvious. I don't want to create like a seasickness vibe from people. And the good thing about doing this is that even when it's these two padded instruments, now that there's that sidechain movement, it creates a groove even just with two droning sounds. And since this is like dance funk in particular, but generally all music is sort of oriented around dance, it's super, 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 super important to have groove going everywhere we can get it. The other thing I really like about reverbs and delays is it's a great place to kind of create like an extra stereo experience. So I'm going to try and see if I can make this reverb thing feel like it's coming from outside my headphones with a comb filter. So let's do this. I don't know if you can hear what this is doing, but you'll notice that it creates this sort of implausible stereo world for something to live in. It very rarely sounds great on something on its own, but when we're talking about things like reverbs and delays where it's not a primary element, we don't really care if it holds up when it folds to mono. That's a great place to create like this sort of extra stereo thing. I'm going to play with it a little bit more, but just where it's defaulting to already sounds really good in minus mode. This is kind of like a more balanced stereo image that feels like it's going a little bit beyond the headphones. I really dig that too. Ooh, and that's beautiful. Yeah, now we're cooking with gas. All right, I'm going to take a little bit of the lows out of this echo thing. I don't know how much is down there. If there's sub down there, I'm just going to filter it out. Now we got a nice solid high pass there, so we're just going to do like a little broad shelf right here. And it really doesn't need to be much. Love it. So far, so good. Let's get in our next element here. So this feels like it's losing its presence. So this is a really good element. Actually, I'm going to throw on VSX again real quick. This is a really, really good element. You know, we live in a very weird world where we're like making music that needs to translate to a car that has 6 subs in it and also at the same time sounds good on a cell phone. You know? Which I love it. Like, you know, it makes things interesting and exciting. But whenever we have a high frequency kind of thing like this, that is like the ear candy for the earbud and cell phone listeners. So I'm going to I'm going to go through 2 different convolutions here. I'm going to grab the earbuds. Where's my earbuds? Earbuds. There they are, SA pods. And we're going to go with wireless because, let's be honest, who's got wired earbuds in 2023? Okay, that sounds pretty good in solo on the pods. Let's bring in everything else. Okay, so we definitely want more of it in general. We just want that up a little bit. And I think the body of it sounds really nice on its own, but it kind of clashes a little bit with the body of the pre-lead that we were just working on before. Turning the analyzer off, I don't want that to distract me. Yeah, that stuff. Like it's such a pretty sound, but sometimes you just have to say, like, for the sake of everything else, it kind of has to come down a little bit. And then where we're going to compensate is going to be in the upper frequencies, and where I'm going to really check for the upper frequencies. The future is having 6 subs in your earbuds. Yeah. Slate, get on it. The Matthew Weiss earbud experience. It's just 2 subs hanging from your ears like earrings. All right, let's do. There's a cell phone emulation, which honestly so brilliant to have this. And now we're gonna get the top end. We want this element right here to really sing, so that like the cell phone listeners get something special. Like, notice it's kind of invisible right now. But I think if we either pull up a key frequency around like 3K or something like that, or just boost it up, you know, make it just louder in general. This thing is like invisible. That's pretty nice. Kind of dig that. So like this area right here. But I think this is just the universe telling me to turn this darn thing up. Not bad. Could use a little more in the sparkle department, I think. You know. Just pay $1,000 for a phone. Something's got to sound good on it. Yeah, it's not bad. Now we make sure that it translates back into our regular listening. It's a little overly full, maybe. Let's hear it back from... It only happens momentarily, though. This is another really interesting and important point in mixing. Things that happen momentarily can be completely out of whack. And in a certain way, the more out of whack they are, the better. Because they're only happening momentarily, so they kind of shock the system a little bit when they're very goofy sounding. So if something suddenly becomes way too full, or way too bright, or way too bassy, but just for like a split second, it's very exciting to the listener. Where it's problematic for the listener is if that continues on for a duration of time. Then it becomes fatiguing, irritating, etc. Yeah, actually, I like that it's a little overpowering for just that very brief period of time, because then it also creates a level of contrast where as soon as the chorus breaks, all of that fullness kind of goes away a little bit, and we get this tighter sound again, which we kind of need because it's sort of a roomy sound, so that contrast is going to be hard to get otherwise. when I hear that, it also makes me think maybe it's better that this main chord stab thing here is a little bit on the tighter sound, the way that it naturally is. Because if we make it too full, we might lose some of that contrast. So I'm going to attempt to bring a little bit of fullness into that sound, but I have a feeling the way to get the fullness that I'm looking for is actually going to be to have some kind of a stereo chorusing effect on the bass tucked in subtly, just widening out the bass guitar a little bit to give it a little bit more bigness, particularly in that chorus. But let's see what happens, you know? Sometimes it's very important to not have too much expectation, especially for me. I kind of dig that though. That's kind of that fullness that I was hoping for. I still might bring in like a stereo chorus on the bass and then rebalance things a little bit, but I mean that's sort of immediately what I wanted to hear. Sure, crash cymbal, why not? What? Oh, is my effects folder muted? Is there even anything else under the effects? Okay. Anytime we have, see, this is one of those things where it's like, this is very bright, swishy sound, but it only happens for a moment. So we want it to be overpowering. Like, more, please. And just because it's very treble oriented, I think I want to throw back on VSX or HD linear, perhaps, just so that I can get a, like either Steven's Room or the HD linear playback, just so I can get like a really good honest idea of how bright we are up there. That sounds good there. Sounds even better there. Oh, these are stupid bright. Hold on. Still sounds good there. Okay, so far everything is looking real good. That's sounding great. What about car? Where's the? Where's the regular car? This is my preferred car. Oh, I missed it. Now, see, sometimes the car is the giveaway for certain things. If this tells me right away, I just want this to be a little bit wider. And it's not that I want it wider for the sake of width. I want it wider for the sake of that movement that it's creating. Which makes sense because we're in a smaller environment. More. Little more. That was pretty good though. Are we hitting diminishing returns? What's happening? Let's turn it way up. Yeah, I'm starting to feel like I'm losing. We gotta get into Slate. Okay, there's something else in the effects bed. That's what I'm missing. That's why it's not translating right. Alright, let's put this back down at around 140, because it did feel good there. But I think there's another element that is hiding somewhere. Maybe not. Okay, interesting. I'm going to put a little note here. Compress, make me more swishy. because when it's in the full mix, it almost sounds like there's a white noise tail that I'm hearing, but when I solo it, I really hear the discrete echoes more, and I like that white noise tail, so maybe compressing it a little bit might bring out that white noise tail a little bit, something like that. This is one of those things where, like, this isn't really part of the first pass for me, and I don't want to get distracted on that kind of minutia, because then I forget that I'm, supposed to be treating vocals. Like, it's going to be a much more important part of the song if I can get the vocals right. So I feel like we've got our basic elements in. Didn't require much to get something that sounds great, which I love that. Next time I do one of these, I'll see if I can find like a really problematic record, because it's the other side of the table. Like, the two hardest things to do are the ones that are easy and the ones that are hard. Let's see. So bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that shit. It's interesting. Okay, so there's a couple things going on here. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, mannequin, baby. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen, yeah. There's a lot of room tone on there. This is a tangent here, but room tone is a really interesting thing. I think people spend so much time fighting room tone that they don't realize that room tone can be enjoyable and good. I would rather hear a nice, well-balanced space that has room tone in it than somebody recording in a closet where there's like no room tail, but the actual sound is crazy. So before you put up your blanket forts, just maybe allow yourself to embrace the actual sound of the room that you're in. And in fact, in this case, I'm going to think of it as like a mono room return. And when I compress the vocals, I'm actually going to be listening to that room tail and see if I can get it to sit in a way that I really like. When I'm EQing the vocals, I'm also going to be listening to that room tail and see what I can do to sweeten up the space that's naturally around the voice. It's definitely a little overly dynamic. I think it was recorded with some compression, but the compression settings are maybe a little loose or something like that. And then we've also got some individual moments like this where there's like little spikes in the audio. So for this kind of stuff, I actually prefer just to go in there and do just manual gain structuring here, because if I don't, it's those kinds of bursts are going to overswing the compressor. So I might get perfect compression settings for like every moment except for there, and it's like, why not just grab these slightly loud moments here and just tame them down ever so slightly, wider crossfades, so that it's not like, jumping around being nuts, but anything that might overswing the compressor. Oh, that looks like a little clipping, doesn't it? Clipping is another thing, people tend to get a little precious about clipping. I don't. I think as long as it's not like heinously bad, it's something we maybe do want to avoid, but it's not going to ruin the end listener's experience, particularly if it's only momentarily, and particularly if it's on a take where the performance is really good. So let's not sacrifice performance for sound quality. People don't really listen to the sound quality of a record. It's not realistic. Okay, so basic little quick gain stagey kind of thing here. Let's get our compression set. Mannequin, make me a mannequin, mannequin. Gonna just do my go-to. Go-to is the custom opto. And the way that I like to do it is I set the speed very, very high up. I set the ratio very, very high up. And then I predict what tone setting I want, if any. Usually flat. I would say for vocals, 75% of the time flat. When do I not want flat? If there's already quality of the vocal that I want to suppress. So So like if this was already, say, a bright sounding vocal, I might want to set this to warm to kind of offset that. In this particular case, I think it could use a little bit of air, so I'm going to set it to airy, and that's going to take some of the top frequencies out of the side chain. And the reason I'm predicting that is because if you change the tone after you do your settings are not going to hold up quite as well. You're going to have to readjust them. So it's better just to kind of know what tone you're going for ahead of time and then go for it. But that just comes from repeated use. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to squash the vocal. I want to see if I can get it to go too far. So I'm going to go to one of the louder sections of the vocal. Let's make it happen, yeah, baby. All right, so that's pretty loud. And I'm going to... That actually might be too loud. We might be a little louder than everything else that's happening in the record. Not really. So yeah, one of the louder sections. And I'm going to just basically get it to where I no longer like the way that it sounds at all. Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that shit. Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that shit. Yeah, so like around there. It didn't take long to find that. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that shit. So what's happening right now is there's... First of all, I can actually literally hear the compression swinging, which is generally not a good thing, although not always a bad thing. But the other thing is that there's a tension, a very, very heavy tension that's occurring on the vocal. Are you audible to everyone? Because I'm not able to hear you. Alright, somebody's saying that I can't be heard. Are you guys able to hear my voice? Am I just talking into myself this whole time? I feel like you got... Okay, great. Alright, cool. Just checking. Alright. So, the vocal is overly tense. So there's a few things that we can do to ameliorate that. First of all, just lowering the ratio in general is going to reduce the tension. But I think that in this case, because I hear the compression over swinging and because of the amount of tension that I'm hearing, we have a speed constant issue, and that's our main problem. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen, yeah. And it's still not bad for the actual, like, punch of the vocal. It's really not terrible even at this very, very fast speed. But I do want to hear a little bit more of the front end and maybe a little bit less of the room tone that's coming up as a result. Get some mannequin, make me a mannequin, mannequin. Get some mannequin, make me a mannequin, mannequin, baby. So this is a little faster than I normally have my vocals set, but I actually kind of like the feel of it in solo. Let's hear how it sounds in the record. Get some Alright, we need to level match a little bit better. We're pretty close, actually. I think I'm going to be a little on the faster side for this vocal. I'm going to slow it down a little bit more because I still want a little bit more front end from the vocal, a little bit more punch. But there might also be like a little bit of a pocket thing going on where smearing the attack and punchiness of the vocal might be hiding like little imperfections in the pocket. That's it. Boom. I turned it on immediately and I knew it. As soon as I heard it, I knew it. The hardest part of mixing, I think, and this is something that I'm still working on quite a bit, is always having like the lizard brain side active, where your instincts are just ready to fire and you don't think about things. I try to stay in that state of being able to just like hear the record without actually hearing the record, just let my instinct go, and that I feel like is a really good moment for that. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. I might even keep the 10-to-1 ratio. I'm going to back the ratio off a little bit because like the logical thinking side of my brain says, hey, you are on the highest ratio you can possibly go. But if I start backing it off and I end up not liking it, then I'm just going to put it right back. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, mannequin. Yeah, so like as I start backing off the ratio, the vocal starts getting bigger, but it also starts getting a little bit looser. So I think this is going to be a really heavily compressed vocal, and we're going to be somewhere between where we're at right now and all the way up. Because I kind of like the tightness that this heavy compression is bringing. Check the chat real quick. Okay, great. Everybody's hearing. That's good. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that shit. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin. Yeah, like I'm making the vocal smaller, but honestly, I'm getting in touch with the groove a little bit better, so I think that that's a good thing. Now, I might add, I'm going to add a little bit of EQ here because there's like a mid-range ring that I need to get rid of. And that is going to make the vocal even smaller still because, you know, you get rid of something, it's going to take away stuff with it. So, you know, we might have to kind of go back and forth and play that little dance at this point. But that's fine. That's what we're here for. That's what we're doing. So let's grab a nice flexible parametric, figure out where this is. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, man. Yeah, we can really hear it on mannequin. Me a mannequin. Mannequin. Can we get manic 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 manic. You know, there's like a ping, like a boom bonk 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 noise in there. It sounds like it's not part of the voice. It sounds like it's something else. Manic 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 manic. Now, if I know sounds like I know sounds, it's somewhere between maybe 600 hertz at the lowest and like 1.2K at the highest. It's somewhere in that range, and my guess is probably around 800. But I've got my SSL thing as narrow as I can. I'm going to boost up about 6 dB and see if I can kind of find it. Manic, 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 manic. Make me a mannequin, mannequin, baby. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Okay. Mannequin, make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it. So I'm gonna see if I can target it a little bit better using something like Eosis or something like that, or Fab Filter. This is where analyzers are useful. I know what I'm looking for. Manic, 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 manic. Make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that. So now my vocal's a little small. I'm going to go back to the compressor. I'm going to see if I just want to turn it louder or if maybe I want to back off the ratio a little bit. And we're going to figure out just what feels better. And that's what we're going to go with. It's a mannequin, make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. You got what everybody wants, so bring. So just lightening up the ratio, I already like it a little bit better. And the reason being is that it's not just making it feel a little bit bigger, it's also feeling like it's breathing a little bit better. So now that we've EQ'd out that thing that is making the vocal smaller but cleaner, we can make the vocal a little bigger and looser, and it feels better, right? This is why webinars almost are a better way of doing this than like tutorials, because mixing is not a linear process. You don't just sort of go straight forward. You're always going straight forward, then coming back a step to readjust, then going straight forward, then coming back a step to readjust. Now, for vocal level, I'm going to switch over to VSX again. I'm going to pull this up. And there's a couple Somebody is unmuted. Whoever that is, could we just mute up real quick? I don't know. Okay, cool. Thank you. So for vocal level, I'm going to start with my home base, which is Steven's room. It feels pretty good. It feels pretty well balanced on this. Again, this is probably sounding pretty weird to you if you're not using VSX headphones. Certainly probably sounding very weird to you if you're not using headphones at all. It feels a little thin, so they could have a little bit more weight to it, but level-wise, it's about right. The other place where I really want to check is something like NS10s or boomboxes or Avantones. Those small, crappy speakers that are band limited are going to give you a really, really good idea as to whether or not the the vocals are sitting in the right place. So we're going to start with the NS10 near fields here in energy. It's a little crusty in the upper mids. Definitely, this is telling me that like the upper mids need like a little smoothing out, but it's not way off. And then again, I could use a little bit more fullness. Maybe we're like a dB low on the vocals, because on these NS10s, the vocals should feel maybe like either well balanced, like really well balanced and even with things, or maybe even like a hair loud. And then the boombox, because this here, if the vocals are not loud and present on the boombox, they're too low, almost always, unless you're doing like shoegazer music or something specifically where the vocals are supposed to sit a little low. Yeah, so you get, once I switch over to the boombox, like the vocals become really exposed, but they sound almost like they're perfectly balanced on the boombox, and usually on the boombox, I want them to actually feel like they're ever so slightly loud. So I'm just going to add like a dB, just to see how that feels. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a man. One hair more. Like we're doing like very small. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin. Yeah, like that's the level for a blended vocal, which is what I'm going for here. I want a vocal that kind of meets me right where it wants to be. Now, we might decide a little bit later, like, oh, maybe this should be more vocal driven, but I don't think so. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. Yo, got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Cool, not bad. Display and show it off like it's a man. Notice how much more obvious all that room tone is, by the way, when we're in solo. When the room tone, when we're not in solo, the room tone almost disappears. Display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. Yo, got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. It also sits very differently. Put it on display and show it off like. Let's real quick. There we go. Cool. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Like all those center frequencies become way more obvious when we're in solo. So I think on top of. Put it on display and show. Okay, this is where I need to turn off the analyzer again. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. Yo, got what everybody wants, so bring you. Okay, so I think what I want to do here is just very, very gently. Should I wear my VSX headphones? Yeah, I think if you have VSX, it's gonna be good to have it on. I'm sort of switching between both because of the nature of this broadcast. It's not ideal, but it works. So what I'm going to do here is a very, very light multiband across the center mid-range here, just so that the vocal kind of glues into the record a little bit. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, baby. Put it on display. So I'm going to use really slow settings, and we just want to be ever so slightly softening things a bit. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, baby. You got. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, baby. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin. This might be a little too gentle, but we'll see once we actually flip it back in with the context of everything else. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, babe. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it out. That's actually pretty good. Let's see. All right. Starting to get a little bit of lag here. So anybody who has their camera on, and it's not too many people, I'm going to ask you to turn the camera off because that tends to slow down the Zoom broadcast. Would it be good if you level? My voice is louder than the track. I can bring my voice down, so I'll do that. Let me move this. Okay, bringing my voice down a little bit here. All right, cool. So, and let's mute you. There we go. Okay. Where were we at? Right, the vocal. That's starting to sound pretty even overall. Like, you know, we don't want to kill it in terms of the dynamics and things like that. We want there to be some variation. Now, the question is how to get some weight into this vocal, because the way that he's singing, he just doesn't have a lot of chest in his voice. Name is on a summertime fire. I think I'm gonna make a mine. Yeah. So I think I'm going to try the bass harmonic trick, using like R bass or max bass or something like that to put lower harmonics in there. If that doesn't work, sometimes FabFilter Saturn is a good way to do it. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, baby. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, baby. Put it on display and show. Is he saying mannequin or man again? I think he's saying man again. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, baby. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Okay, I like that. We're going to bypass it for a second. We're going to see if we can do better. I'm going to try it with FabFilter Saturn. There we go. And the way that I do it with FabFilter Saturn is I split the crossover to where I'm trying to target things, get things to sound fuller. In this case, it's the bass range of the voice. Somebody is unmuted. Whoever is unmuted, could we mute up? I'm hearing noise come in, so somebody is specifically... Okay, there we go, found it. Got it. Okay. So I hit my target range, whatever that is. In this particular case, it is the low frequencies of the voice. And I'm going to use harmonics to kind of try to fill in the space here. And depending on how off it feels, I might use something that's a little bit more obviously saturated. In this particular case, it does feel pretty obvious that there's like a thinness to this voice. So this default warm tape is going to be good for something that's a little bit more obvious, and I'm also going to compress the low frequencies a little bit as well. So we're starting to get just the slightest bit of square waving. The question is that going to translate, like once we hear the vocal, are we going to start hearing pronounced clipping or not? Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. And once we're not soloing the band, I don't really hear any of that. So this is also a good alternative. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. And then the question is just what's going to feel better. So max bass. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Actually, it feels pretty good. It's pretty transparent there. Saturn 2. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. And it's also boosting up some of that range a little bit, so it might be becoming a little bit muddy in the process, so it might just want to, take it down a dB or two, something like that. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a man. And then the real test that we always go back to anytime we're working in solo here is going to be making sure that it translates correctly in the context of the mix. Melbourne, could you turn off your video camera? Anybody who's got a video camera on, please turn it off. Thank you. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. That feels great. I'm definitely happy with that. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin. So the max bass is a little tighter. Saturn's a little bit bigger. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. And then here, this is where VSX becomes very helpful again, because I can start to get different perspectives, right? Because right now, on my headphones, just with the normal headphones, it sounds better with Saturn. However, if I switch over to something that maybe starts giving us a little bit more bass or something like that, then we might start to hear things a little bit differently. So I'm thinking, like, if I go into, say, the car, let's go into the regular car here. If the vocal sounds boomy with the Saturn on, then we've got a problem, right? Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. Which it doesn't. It sounds really nice, actually, in the car. Let's try max bass. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin. It feels a little too anemic with max bass. Like, it feels like the vocal is just maybe low or something like that. So maybe if I turn up the vocal a dB or so. Put it on display and show it off like it. But then a lot of frequencies that I don't like the more strident frequencies, start becoming more obvious. So this allows me to know pretty immediately, like, okay, FabFilter Saturn is what's doing the job here. And this. So the reason why I like VSX so much is because it's not that it's necessarily going to replace my home system or anything like that. It's that it becomes a really, really good translation check immediately. Like, I don't have to go out to a car, because I can just do that, and now I know, like, okay, I'm sure that the Saturn approach is the way to do it. So now I can jump back here so that you guys aren't hearing that weird sound if you're not using VSX. Check this chat real quick. Yeah, definitely, he's singing different words, I guess. Okay, cool. So this is probably going to be a good basic setting for the rest of the vocals. That would be my guess. Yeah, because he's kind of singing the same way. So we can just use this as like the basic template treatment for the vocal. I do have to say, the stuff that's bugging me, like, there's this kind of like haziness to the vocal and this kind of like slight graininess thing going on in the upper mids, but now that the lower mids and low end of the vocal are kind of worked out, it doesn't actually bother me as much. It kind of just feels like character. It's sort of kind of working for me. So I don't know how much I really want to micromanage the vocal beyond this. I think for getting basic balances, a basic first pass, and something that feels good, this is a really good starting place.
It's a mannequin, make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. Yo, got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that shit. Ooh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, iced tea. So sweet, dang. She's saying I'll never find nobody even slightly that is so.
I hope that makes sense to you guys because it's really important. I was thinking about this the other day, where it's like just being able to ignore what sounds good. Somebody's unmuted again. There we go. Mute. Just to be able to really like turn off that brain. And anybody who's new coming in, by the way, please turn off your camera because it slows down the broadcast. Just like, what's the best way to put it? Okay, so it came up. I remember why I was thinking about it. It came up in the discussion about limiting versus clipping, and the pros and cons of each. And I tend to be in favor of both to an extent, but oftentimes I'll prefer clipping a master as opposed to overusing a limiter to get something louder. And the reason is because once you start pushing a limiter too much, you start to really soften things. Because you're reducing dynamic energy. That's the way a limiter works. A limiter preserves the sound by reducing dynamic energy, even though you're pushing into a ceiling. Without a limiter, you are turning amplitude into harmonic energy. There's not enough room for the fundamental energy. It gets converted into harmonic energy, and so it starts to color the sound or break up. But if the breakup that you're getting from a clipper or just straight up clipping is happening over such a short duration of time that the end listener isn't really going to notice it, it's sometimes better than limiting because you keep that dynamic energy effectively in there. So, I lost my train of thought a little bit. So the conversation about whether or not that's a good thing at all, maybe we should just be leaving the level of the record quieter. And the answer to that is probably yes, but is it going to affect the... what? Mute. Okay, is there somebody else unmuted? Okay. There is. There we go. Okay, cool. I don't know why everybody's joining now. It's a little weird. I guess maybe the actual Zoom link didn't get posted until maybe more recently, which kind of sucks. The end listener is not going to be able to judge what is or isn't good sound. They're not really listening to that. They're listening to what makes the music feel like a good representation of the music. And sometimes things like distortion actually enhance the experience of the music. And so with that being said, the end listener is not going to be able to pinpoint like, oh, these vocals don't sound right. They sound like they're a little dusty or whatever. The only people who are going to point that out is like overly judgmental audio engineers who aren't really mixing records. They're kind of more like sitting around on forums and being pricks. That's not the audience, and it takes a long time to learn that that's not the audience, right? Because we want to impress our peers and everything like that, but in reality there's no benefit. The only thing that's important is that the record feels good, because you want to give it as much chance of success as possible out of the gate. And then, of course, it's up to the marketing and all that stuff afterwards, but you want to give it as much success as possible, and that's going to come down to how the record feels, how the end listener feels when they put it on, and they're not going to catch any of that kind of stuff.
Got that shit. Ooh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, so sweet, dang. She's saying I'll never find nobody even slightly that is so sweet,
which makes me think a couple of things with this vocal, right? Like, first of all, there was, when I got the session, there was a delay send and a reverb send already on the vocal. And I don't know if we need those. I kind of like that tighter sound. I think that the room sound that was already captured as part of the vocal might actually be just what we need. We might be good. Let's bring in the layer real quick.
Give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, iced tea. So sweet, dang.
Yeah, let's throw these same effects on our vocal layer. Sometimes with vocal layers, we want them to be less bright or something like that, but I haven't really brought up any treble in this vocal, so we might not need to.
Give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, iced tea. So sweet, dang. She's saying I'll never find nobody even slightly. That is so sweet.
So I do think I want to change my compression on this vocal layer.
Oh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea.
Yeah, I just want to use a limiter to catch anywhere where it feels like it might be getting a little bit out of pocket. But otherwise, I don't think it needs that compression.
So sweet, yeah. She's saying I'll never find nobody even slightly.
There we go.
Give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, iced tea. So sweet, dang. She's saying I'll never find nobody even slightly. That is so sweet, yeah.
I think because it's the chorus, I'm going to try and sneak up a little bit more of that vocal layer. Right now, this vocal layer is like the Britney Spears approach, where it's so low you don't really hear a second vocal. It just kind of feels fuller.
Give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, so sweet.
Yeah, and there's like maybe a couple little spots where we might need to jump in there and just do a little nudge, right? We're not quite in time for this part right here.
So sweet, dang.
Yeah, but if it's a little off, like there's a little bit of some kind of a slapbacky sort of thing happening, it's not the end of the world.
Give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, so sweet, dang. She's saying I'll never find nobody even slightly. That is so sweet.
So I think what I want to do is I maybe just want to spread the vocal out, right? I don't think that any kind of ambience that we need is going to be super necessary. So let's see if we can fatten the vocal up side to sidewise. A couple ways we can do that, and I do this pretty much all the time because I never know which one's going to be best ahead of time. But one way that we can do it is with a setting here in Verb Suite Classic. If we go to our, oh no, is this the one where I didn't download the BM7 ones? Crud. Okay, well, if you have the full Verb Suite Classic with the Bricasti impulses, under Plate, there's one called Percussion Air that's really good. Might be able to get something off of the FG16X, though. Or maybe even the 2016. Let's see what happens if we do this. Delay. Let's put this into pre-fader mode real quick and turn it way up. And just hear what this delay sounds like. Or, it's not even a delay, really.
Ooh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, so sweet.
That's a little crazy sounding. Not necessarily bad, but definitely has like a lot of crazy stuff happening. How about a warm room?
Ooh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea.
That might work perfectly. That might be exactly what we're looking for. Let's get a good balance.
Ooh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, so sweet, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not mad at that at all.
Ooh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea.
Ooh! Hey, look at that. Okay, we don't need to try a bunch of different things because that feels right. Another one of those things where it's like I'm constantly reminding myself is once I like it, stop. I feel like I say this every time I do a webinar, but it's like, once I get to the point where I like it, stop doing stuff. Move on. The other thing is, you know, when I'm mixing, if I'm doing this with the little bop, that's a very, very good thing. That's my body telling me that the music is doing what it's supposed to do. If I have to force myself to bounce to it or whatever, then the music's not working. Something's off.
Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin.
Like here, I'm not getting the same bounce, and I think it's because of the vocal delivery, actually. I think this is a case where I need a more scopic sounding reverb, something that kind of slurs things over a little bit. So I'm thinking, could do Valhalla. I kind of want something that sounds a little bit more like, keeping with the kind of like 80s theme that's going on here, the disco theme. So I probably want something that's more like a long hall from, yeah, or like a large church from 480L kind of a vibe. So really, really long reverb.
Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, mannequin.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm going for here. I like that a lot better. I mean, it's still up very, very loud. But we are also going to take our LFO tool. If you were here when we did this, and we did the little bit of side chain to get the groove going, we're going to throw that on the back end of this longer reverb as well. We're going to basically kind of turn it into a padding instrument ever so slightly.
Mannequin, babe. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that shit.
And let's just turn this way down.
Mannequin, babe. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin.
So sometimes we'll run into these situations where we want like a really big reverb sound, but we throw it on there and it's like, oh my god, it's eating everything alive. There's a pretty popular little trick that is very effective and works quite well, where once you get your reverb kind of about where you want it, you band limit it. So I'm going to take everything that's below maybe about 300 hertz, high pass it out. I'll take everything that's above maybe about 5K, 6K, maybe even 4K, low pass it out.
Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that shit. Ooh, give me that shit. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. You got what everybody.
Yeah, definitely heading in that direction. It's getting better. The other thing that we can do is we can take a compressor and we want to put it in front of the reverb, where we're going to take really any compressor. It doesn't have to be anything special. Put the ratio pretty high, put the attack pretty fast, put the release pretty slow. Take it out of manual. When we're in electro, we have to be like a little bit slower than what makes sense. And then basically we're just going to get a little bit of gain reduction.
Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. You got what. Put it on display and show it off like it's a mannequin. Make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that shit. Ooh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, so sweet, so.
Okay, let's get rid of this. Let's make this completely inactive here. And what we want to listen to for the very last thing before we wrap up here is the transition between the pre-chorus and the chorus. It should feel like it sort of sucks in, tightens up, becomes super punchy, super dancey, and that it should almost feel like a drop in a way.
You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that shit. Ooh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, so sweet,
really close. Not to harp on it too much, but it is really important to get this reverb right. I'm going to throw this back into pre-fader mode. I want it to be a little dreamier, so I need some kind of a modulation going on it. It could be a chorus, it could be a flanger, it could be a phaser, it could be any of those things. I'm thinking maybe a little bit of like meta flanger or something like that. Nobody's really going to be able to parse out the differences in the actual flangering, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I think I do want it to be tempo synced. Let's do it on like, oh, that's fast. Oh, we're going faster. There we go. I want it to be slower than that. Yeah, that feels pretty good.
It's a mannequin, make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that shit. Ooh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, so sweet, babe. She's saying I'll never find nobody even slightly that is so sweet.
Yeah, that's giving me everything I'm looking for. Perfect. This is a great place to wrap. Just getting that contrast. And then the next step is going to be finding this area right here as the pre-chorus leads into the hook and finding anywhere where I can start building tension, basically putting more sound into the system. So for example, a really good way to do that would be something like grabbing maybe just like the snares that are right here, having them on a duplicate track. This might be the last thing we do because, you know, this is where we're starting to get out of the static mix and into the creative automation, finding the moments mix. So what happens if I take something like good old repeater and I put it on like a really murky, there's literally one called murky delay, so let's start there. A really murky sound. We're going to have it mix at 100%, and we're going to put the delay down to like 64th notes. So that might be a little too quick. Yeah, we're going to have the feedback. And then throw a little bit of reverb on this as well. We're going to use a wet to dry ratio as an insert. We're breaking all the rules. And believe it or not, we're going to use another instance of repeater after that. I know this is making no sense, but just rock with me here for a second. Oh, I see. These are unlinked. That's why we were having this problem. Okay. And one more little piece of the ingredient. I promise this is going somewhere that's going to make sense in a moment. The LFO tool.
It's a mannequin, make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that shit. Ooh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea. Don't forget it's a mannequin, make me a mannequin, mannequin, babe. You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in.
notice it's actually a pretty invisible sound as we're doing it. It's really, we're just trying to put in a little bit of extra tension or something as this is building up.
Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that shit. Ooh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, ice.
We can even get really wild, and just on the very, 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 very last note, we're gonna do this like that.
Ooh, give me that sugar, honey, ice.
A little too obvious there.
Ooh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, iced tea. So, ooh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, ice.
So we got a little bit of this like subtle build in the back.
You got what everybody wants, so bring your wagon in. Let's make it happen, yeah. Baby, you got that shit. Ooh, give me that sugar, honey, iced tea, iced tea. So sweet, so sweet.
Nice. All right, I think this is a good place to wrap. I'm going to check the chat here. Let's see. What the hell? Save that as a preset and save it in the download section of Weiss Advice. Yeah, I can screenshot everything. But I mean, I'm sort of... The preset is the idea of it. I'm trying to basically make a pad out of the snare that's building. Almost kind of creating like a really sloppy... not riser version of a riser, so to speak. Like a funk version of what a riser functionally does in an EDM record. The last part in that effect was LFO Tool, and it was just to continue giving it that swing, that EDM-ish swing that we're hearing in the reverb and in the pad. So everything's kind of moving together, including the... Right? That's the technical term. Cool. All right, let's wrap up here. That's the idea exactly. It made it dance. Perfect way of saying it.